Uh, Welcome back to CBM Calling. Excuse me there for the delay in getting going. I am still digesting turkey and a turkey sandwich that I made for lunch with more leftovers. So welcome back to CBM Calling on this Tuesday post Thanksgiving weekend. I hope your weekend was good, if slightly unusual. But today we're going to carry on talking about food. It's one thing we can always agree on when we're not eating, is we can talk about it. So we're going to be talking to two gentlemen, two farmers that are involved with Foodgrains Bank and with CBM. And we're going to talk about farming and how supporting their projects can really affect change for those that are going hungry around the world. So the backstory is that CBM is one of the founding members of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank. The Foodgrains Bank is a partnership of 15 Canadian churches and church-based agencies working together to end global hunger. So that's a context for when we reference the Foodgrains Bank. That's the body that we're referring to, and we'll post a link to the Foodgrains website in the notes here. So a couple of sobering statistics I was just reviewing right off of the website, the Foodgrains website, is that 690 million people are experiencing hunger or are food insecure, and that 98% of those, it would be come as no surprise, are in the developing world. And just looking into some of the effects of the global pandemic, they're considering that another 130 and maybe more, 130 million people will be pushed into food insecurity and hunger due to the effects of the pandemic. But let's talk about some of the positives and some of the things that we can actually do positively to affect change and to feed hungry people. So with me today is, I'm not sure what part of your screen you're seeing, but Jordan Weber. Jordan, can you just wave so we know who's who? Jordan is a CBM board member. He is also a Foodgrains Bank board member on behalf of CBM. And he is a farmer in Brownfield, Alberta. And I believe we're going to show a map of where that is. And you were just telling us that you've already had killing frost and snow is on the way. So
yep,
it's somewhat north. And on the other side of the country, let me introduce you to Greg Jones, who is in North River, Nova Scotia. That's about a 4,500 kilometer drive from where Jordan is. And he is at a different part of his growing season, that's for sure. What's the temperature there, Greg?
It's about 10 degrees and sunny today, so it's they can keep the snow out west for now.
Yeah, indeed. And so we're going to hear from both these gentlemen, both involved in grow projects. Jordan's grow project has a long history, and we're going to hear a bit about that. And then Greg's going to talk a bit about what is the newest grow project to CBM, which is his farm in Truro, which has been going for almost 5 years now, I believe. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for being on the call. I trust that your Thanksgiving weekend was good, if, yeah, as I say, somewhat strange this year. So anyways, Jordan, we're going to talk about grow projects. So let's talk about your family and the history of your family with the Canadian Foodgrains Bank.
Yeah, we've been very excited to be part of the Canadian Foodgrains Bank and CBM. And what happened with us was in 1983, my grandfather Art and his cousin Clayton got a call from a group of Mennonite farmers in Manitoba and said, "We're thinking of starting this thing called a food bank, and we're wondering if you as Baptists would like to be involved." And so they had prearranged bagging in, I believe, Lacombe, Alberta, and they were gathering grain there, bagging grain, putting it on a train, and actually shipping it, that actual grain, across to the developing famine in Ethiopia. And so after getting that call, I'm so glad that they did. They responded and said, "Yes, we can do that." And they loaded, my grandpa had a 3-ton truck, and Clayton had a semi-truck trailer, and they loaded up and headed for Lacombe. As the story goes, one of the trucks blew up halfway there, and they had to repair it before making the second half of the journey. But they made it to Lacombe, and that was our first donations to CBM through CFGB in 1983. And yeah, our community and my family has been honored to be a part of this movement ever since.
Very good. That's a we are the world moment for sure. When you think back to the famine in '83 and the rock concerts that were held and the records that were sold when we used to buy records, that was a moment out west in which your family was actually responding um, from their own capabilities. So quite a rock star Art must have been in a sense. So thank you for that. And it's good to reinforce the ecumenical nature of what the Foodgrains Bank is doing to feed hungry people, and doing it as a Christian witness of the church's solidarity together. So Greg, what about your family's connection to farming and the land? And
Well, my wife and I are both from a dairy background. My wife Carol she grew up on a fifth generation dairy farm, and as I was growing up, I had a very close uncle who was pretty influential in my life, and he had a dairy farm. So when we graduated from university and got started in life, we ended up with our own dairy farm and ran that for a number of years. And now we have a few beef cattle, and we grow crops. So it's a passion.
yeah, I didn't realize it was a mixed bag for you. I thought it was strictly farming the land. I don't know what. There's the urban guy trying to guess at what the terminology is. Is that still farming? Is it agriculture? If you have animals, is it still agriculture?
Right.
I guess so.
Right.
Oh, terrific. Well, you both have connections to the Foodgrains Bank, and we were laughing as we were just talking about getting going today that Jordan didn't know that Greg has been doing volunteer work, and yet it's this Greg Jones whose name shows up on the minutes. How did that go?
Greg is one of my heroes that volunteers and goes over and audits grow projects internationally on behalf of the Foodgrains Bank. And I sit on the audit and finance committee of the Foodgrains Bank, and every 6 months when we do our reviews, we are so grateful for those people that go and ensure that these projects are done well and are being managed and tracked well. And I hadn't realized that Greg was the Greg Jones on those papers until today. That's awesome.
That is funny. It's been a real pleasure to be involved in that end of it, and it's always impressed me when I go overseas and see how these projects are managed and administered. It's one of the things that got me involved with the growing project was I saw how well things were being done, and the importance of the partner networks that CFGB's established over the years, and it's really an incredible operation.
Yeah, where have you been actually recently?
Where have I been?
Yeah, where have you been? Prior to lockdown?
I've been to Africa a couple of times, to the DR Congo, Burundi, Malawi, Mozambique. I was in the Middle East in Lebanon, and I was in Laos in Southeast Asia and Cambodia.
Wow, you were well traveled with the Foodgrains Bank.
Yeah, it was an eye opener, that's for sure.
Yeah, and you've traveled as well, Jordan, right? You've been overseas with Foodgrains Bank to see.
Yeah, I've been to some of those same projects in Laos. In fact, Greg, you might have been there 3 weeks ahead of me. I think
I was just thinking that.
We almost probably crossed paths. And then I also was able to tour in India, and both those were just deeply meaningful experiences where we saw, the work firsthand of people who certainly wouldn't have had enough to eat without these projects helping them learn to grow crops, tools, that kind of thing, but also providing food directly to those who need it. Those are experiences that change your life. I've only been a couple times, but every time I go, it just completely affects me. Yeah.
What's been the effect for you, Greg? I mean, has it changed the way you view your vocation, for example?
Oh, absolutely. It's hard to describe. It really throws me off personally when I come back to Canada. It takes me about a month to adjust. You're busy absorbing the things you've seen and heard and the people you've talked to, and it's it's changed my attitude drastically to issues, global issues and specifically hunger issues.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's the return trip, isn't it? That's always the culture shock is coming back here. It's never being in the field and seeing the work and seeing how much can be done with how much less. It's always overwhelming to come to return home. I've had that experience for sure. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about the growing projects specifically. So, Jordan, why don't I ask you if you could explain how a grow project works?
Certainly. So when we do a grow project, a farmer sets aside a portion of their acres, and they take those acres and they say, those acres I'm growing for our growing project. And so as they farm through the year, they work away, they seed the crop, they tend to the crop, and they make their best effort to grow as they're growing all their other crops, for profit. That's their business. And then when it's time to harvest, that crop is harvested and those acres are tracked. And the grain from those acres are shipped and sold. And the money that's earned from that crop is then contributed to CBM's account at Canadian Foodgrains Bank. And when those funds then land in CBM's account at the Canadian Foodgrains Bank, they have that available as their equity to do projects internationally, to plan for these awesome projects that they do in Lebanon and other countries around the world. And then as that money goes and funds those projects, it's often matched by the government, so that the farming kind of replicates that investment into this project, and then the government kind of replicates that together. And all in all, it creates a significant value as CBM works on the ground in these countries to feed hungry people ultimately. And so it kind of starts with a seed going in the ground and many, many hands contributing to make that happen. And it ends up as food and activities overseas that help the most needy around the world.
And the cost of the inputs on that acreage is
well, Greg and I were talking about that before the call. It's around $350 an acre, and to break that down a little bit, about a third of that is equipment and getting the work done. A little bit over a third is your inputs and the seed and the fertilizer to help it grow and that kind of stuff. And then you have other costs like renting the land or owning the land and insurance and that kind of stuff. And that all adds up to about $350. It does depend on what crop you're growing. We grow wheat and peas and canola here, those types of crops. So it does depend a little bit, but that's an average. And we're shooting for earning about $500 an acre as we grow those crops. So, we hope to grow that as it becomes a formal donation to CBM's account.
Right. And Greg, does that line up with where, since you are on the other side of the country, does that line up?
It does. Jordan and I were talking a little earlier, and we're just comparing growing seasons and the length of growing seasons. And anyway, we grow slightly different crops, but the math is about the same.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so I think John's going to bring up a graphic of how you can see how this works. So essentially for $350, you can support the farmer who's growing the acre, and that essentially supports the inputs. And then when it's harvested with the rest of the crop and goes to market, then that increase in the profit, as Jordan was saying, 500 or more, depending on the crop and how successful, I guess, the crop is. Is there a value placed on the crop, depending on, if it got, injured by weather, or if it came off perfect, as, clearly we would see a higher price? Is that true? Or is it kind of a flat rate?
In our case, it's certainly affected by weather. We didn't have a great growing season last year. We had a cold, wet spring, and out in the East Coast here, we had Hurricane Dorian that came through the 1st of September and did a lot of crop damage. So we had kind of a disappointing year. This year's looking much, much better. And we're actually fairly fortunate. The one of the people that's involved in the project here can actually take corn. Corn is the major crop that we produce. They will take that corn and they'll grind it and turn it into cornmeal. So there's some value added there. So that gentleman donates his services to do that. And yeah, I mean, we try everything we can to get the best crop we can, and then get the highest dollar value for it. So.
Yeah, it was quite a thing. I was at a growing project a couple of years ago on the escarpment here in Southern Ontario, and they took us out to the field, and it was a bit of a learning tour for folks who are the communications people at the church houses, and they just showed us the acreage and said, "This is all essentially garbage." They're like, "How can that be?" And then he took us up close and said, "It's been damaged by, I believe it was hail and some other, really nasty weather that we had in the growing cycle." And then went on to explain that he'll still earn, some amount of money because it'll be turned into feed, or he'll get something, but that the crop was insured. And it only reinforced that when you have weather events and you're a small scale farmer in the places like you two have been and seen the projects, there's no insurance on that at all, right? You're really at the whims of the weather and the season, and should your crop fail, then you will be going hungry. And yeah, it was just quite a contrast for him to say, but farmers
That
in Canada
part of
protected.
being a farmer and going and seeing farmers who are quite a percentage of the hungry around the world are subsistence farmers, sorry. And yeah, absolutely, going and seeing that they produced a bag of corn, and they need half of that bag of corn to seed their crop the next year, and the other half of that bag of corn is what they're able to consume, and it's simply not enough. And then coming back here, and yeah, there's risks to farming, and we have hail in our area as well, or we've been subject to drought sometimes, and but we are insured. We do have all sorts of these other systems, and that doesn't cause us to go hungry. And so yeah, how those things fit together between us and farmers around the world is very humbling. Yeah.
My wife and I, a couple of years ago, we went on a learning tour together in Malawi, and part of that, one of the major themes to that tour was how climate change affects food production in those areas. And it was really there were some pretty dramatic examples of how these weather events are affecting these farm families, and it really brought home to me anyway the importance of crop insurance. And we are so fortunate in this country to have those supports, but not everyone has the luxury of having those things to prop you up.
Yeah, indeed. You were just mentioning, Jordan, I was asking you about the smoke, and if you had seen any of the smoke from the fires from California, and you had mentioned that some of that smoke may have affected, what was it, the moisture in what you were growing? Is that?
Yeah, so when you're waiting for harvest, I mean, you're eagerly waiting for the crop to be dry enough to harvest so that you can store it or process it properly. And as we were waiting for it to dry, that smoke was covering the sun, which is precious in those moments. And so yeah, it certainly had an effect.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what the Grow project has meant to kind of your communities for both of you. So actually, Greg, why don't you tell us a bit about what the impact of your project has been for the folks around you and your community?
It's been really interesting. It's our project is relatively new, so we've had great support from our local CFGB rep, to bring people together and participate in the project. But we have a number of small businesses in the area that are helping us with either donating inputs like fertilizer and whatnot, seed, that sort of thing, and others that are helping us with marketing campaigns and promotional. They've sort of adopted the Grow Hope project as a fundraising event, it's for community support. We have a group of local farmers that over the years of participating in planting and harvesting. So we're at the stage in our project where it's about raising awareness, and the in Eastern Canada, the Foodgrains Bank identity hasn't been quite as well established as it has been out west and in Central Canada. So, but I think we're making some pretty good strides to raise awareness, and yeah, it's been an interesting thing to see as the community embraces it. There seems to be a lot of support, and to this, we have, of course, church support in our local community and other areas in Nova Scotia, and some of the small business. We've got a very popular market not too far from here that they've got signage up on their 4x8 signage around. So we're slow but sure we're making we're raising that awareness and getting the community support.
Yeah, terrific. And what about you, Jordan? You've had a much longer history in this Grow project. Who are you seeing as your supporters? And
well, certainly we're overwhelmed by the generous support we've had over the years, and it's taken a lot of support from a lot of different areas, from the local community who have really stepped up lots of years to come and help. I remember a few years ago where the harvest was hard, the harvest was getting late, the snow was coming, and people actually stopped harvesting their own crops to come and harvest the Foodgrains crops to make sure that it got out to be able to be donated. And so we've had just overwhelming examples of support over the years. The local ag businesses, as Greg was saying, and then with us, we've had two very long-term partner churches, one in Calgary, Westview, and one in Mississauga, Lorne Park, have paid our land rent and our input costs for, I believe, over a decade. I should know exactly how long, but it's taken a lot of hands and a lot of contribution to make this go. We've been so grateful that, and it's been huge to have that support, and that's really what makes it work is everyone pitching in with the part that they can. And so yeah, we it's been many consistent generous supporters over a long time.
Yeah, terrific. Well, I should mention that if you're listening and you think that your church might be interested in getting some more information about a growing project and about CBM and how this can happen, we have regional reps, and if you check out the cbmin.org website, you'll find Randy, Dennis, and Sonya there, and they can start having those conversations around supporting a group project with your church. It's fascinating when you get to hear reports about your investment or my investment in your project. It's very neat. So the other place that you can go to take action, and you want to see this, I mentioned it earlier, is cbmin.org, and that is at cbmin.org/grow hope. We've built a little interface there, and you can put your money into the ground and see it actually increase, and what kind of yield you could actually see from your assistance with farms and projects like Greg and Jordan's. So you are probably not going to win a Nobel Peace Prize for your efforts to combat hunger, but you can actually take some action this year still with COVID-19 and the pandemic and its effects. There are things that you can do. There are ways that we can still contribute to feeding a hungry world. So thank you both, gentlemen, for your efforts to continue to feed us here in Canada and to show leadership with your Grow projects about taking action on hunger. So thanks to you both.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
All right, we'll look forward to talking again soon. And we will be back actually talking a little bit more about food on Thursday this week on CBM Calling, where Julia from the International Partnerships team is going to be speaking with Polisi in the Congo about how some of the food projects are going there. So we'll have you tune back in on Thursday at 2:30 for CBM Calling. Thanks, guys. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye now.